Good morning. My name is David Ansara of the Free Market Foundation. Welcome to this special media briefing, which is in service of the Free Market Foundation's very important Section 12 initiative, which deals with the ongoing problem of violent crime in South Africa, as well as growing criminalization of economic conduct and individual action. And we are running this campaign on the eve of this very important election. And as part of this campaign, we are putting forward a variety of proposals, including the development of a draft criminal code. And I'm very pleased to welcome Martin van Staden, who is my colleague here. He's the head of policy at the FMF. And he is also the author of this draft criminal code. And what we're going to be doing in this very short press briefing is just highlighting some of the proposals contained in this draft criminal code, why it is that we're putting this forward as a proposal, as well as some of the high-level principles guiding it. But I won't be spending very much more time on this introduction, only to say that we will be posting a link to the draft criminal code that Martin will be discussing in the description below, as well as a link to the press briefing that is accompanying this media briefing, so the press release. And I would also encourage you, members of the media and the public, to post your comments down in the chat, and we will highlight some of those questions in a Q&A session. All right, Martin van Staden, let me hand over to you.
Yeah, thanks, David, and hello to everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join us here today. As David said, I'm not going to be speaking for very long, and I would much rather leave some time open for discussion and for questions, if there are any, from the media and from the audience. And I will return to the criminal code proposal specifically in a moment, but please allow me to first sketch out the context to make this proposal make sense. So at the start of this year, the Free Market Foundation launched its Section 12 initiative for a safer South Africa. We felt, and we continue to believe, that violent crime really is South Africa's most pressing issues amongst a variety of other important problems that deserve attention. But violent crime is so disastrous for people's lives, for the sustainability and the happiness of communities, for economic growth and investment, and of course, really to us at the FMF, most importantly, to our freedom. Violent crime is necessarily destructive of freedom. And we do not think that South Africa's political parties, in the midst of this very consequential election, are really putting violent crime as high on the agenda as it deserves to be. And on that basis, we believed that there is room for the Free Market Foundation to intervene in this discourse, or rather this lack of a discourse. And this does come in the form of our Section 12 initiative. So Section 12 refers to Section 12 of the Constitution, which guarantees to everyone freedom from violence from both private and public sources. And we think that this has various key implications for South Africa that have not made their way through to our public policy environment. So despite it being a constitutional imperative, arguably, it has not seen the light of day in policy. So the FMF has proposed various policies that could really give effect to this constitutional vision and make South Africa safer for everyone. And these interventions that we have proposed are organized around what we call the 4 Ds: definition, development, decentralization, and decriminalization. So development is very easy to understand. We need more resources in our criminal justice system. We need to build more prisons, many more prisons. We need to hire more prosecutors, and we need to hire not necessarily more police officers, but certainly better police officers. And this is relatively uncontentious. And decentralization, also speaking for itself, means that the provinces and municipalities need to start playing a far more prominent role than they currently are playing in policing and in prosecutions. But not only them, also communities and commercial enterprises must start playing a bigger role in solving South Africa's scourge of violent crime. Leaving this huge problem to the central government has been a costly mistake for which hundreds of thousands of people have paid with their lives. Decriminalization is perhaps our most contentious proposal, but maybe the one we feel most strongly about. And in terms of decriminalization, we are proposing that we need to remove all the nonsense from our criminal law that does not belong there. We cannot have police officers and prosecutors wasting time and taxpayer money going after people who did not really do anything that justifies putting them in prison. There are a lot of so-called crimes on the statute book that are victimless, that are too broadly defined, or that would be better placed in civil rather than criminal law. However, we cannot do any of this, development, decentralization, and decriminalization, without addressing the first D, definition. So most of you who are viewing this are criminals. I am a criminal. I do not know why I am a criminal, and I do not know why you are criminals. But I can guarantee that we here all are criminals in some way or another. Maybe one of you recorded a video of your baby taking their first steps and posted it on a WhatsApp group. You are a criminal because you are distributing a film without being registered with the Films and Publications Board. Or maybe one of you was taking the Gauw train back home one evening after a party in Sandton, and maybe you were a bit tipsy. Maybe you annoyed some of your fellow passengers by talking too loudly, and maybe you knew that you were annoying them, but in that state of yours, you did not really care. You are a criminal because you willfully inconvenienced a fellow passenger on public transport. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I could go on and on and on. It is this phenomenon of all of us here likely being criminals, but not knowing why or in terms of what law or obscure regulation that we are problematizing today. So the Free Market Foundation launched its criminalization index a few months ago, whereby we are going to try to comprehensively and accurately set out all the crimes that are on our law book that makes one liable for a criminal record, a fine, or imprisonment. So far, our index already contains several hundred crimes, but we expect, once we are done with this mammoth task, that it will number in the thousands, if not in the tens of thousands, I might wager. The problem here is that there are crimes everywhere. Not criminals committing crimes everywhere, which is certainly a problem, but in our law, there are crimes everywhere, even in places that you might least expect. So basically, every existing and new piece of legislation from Parliament contains at least one crime. Some, like the Banks Act of 1991, alone contain hundreds of crimes. And this is only at the national level. Our provincial legislatures and our municipal councils, in their acts and in their bylaws, also create crimes. And then in the executive branch, our ministers, our provincial MECs, and our municipal MMCs, and the many regulatory agencies around the country also have been given the power to create crimes in terms of executive regulations. Now, nobody, not even a lawyer, can tell you with any degree of certainty how many crimes there are in this country. So we therefore have a fundamental problem of definition. The FMF and its Section 12 initiative has therefore proposed that the new parliament, that will be inaugurated in a few weeks from now, adopt a Criminal Code Act. Now, we have prepared a draft bill, so if Parliament is convinced of the necessity of codifying criminal law, it can adopt this bill as it stands right now, even if it wanted, maybe not after 12 this evening, but certainly now, without needing to do really any more work other than the public participation process and so forth. Now, the bill itself is relatively short, and it does basically and primarily one thing. It requires that all old and new crimes that are recognized by South African law be codified into one depository, one accessible database, which we have called the Criminal Code. Now, this bill, if it is adopted, assigns to Parliament, to the provincial legislatures, and to municipal councils a schedule in the bill, which they may at their own initiative, amend and modify. They don't have to go through Parliament. This means that each sphere of government in South Africa retains its constitutional authority. So we are therefore not proposing to centralize criminal law, not by any means. We believe very firmly in decentralization and certainly in the common law. We do not propose that there be a codification of law that replaces the common law. What we are instead proposing is that ordinary South Africans be enabled to see for themselves exactly what counts as criminal in this country, and to be allowed, as a result, to bring their behavior in line with that reality. Presently, that is virtually impossible. As I said, we are all criminals, and we potentially are committing many crimes every day by doing things that we would think are innocent, harmless, victimless, but which the current government or a previous government has in some way deemed to be criminal in terms of some obscure piece of legislation or regulation that no one knows exists. And our proposal is to make sure that everyone knows what conduct is criminalized. And the most efficient step to this is to bring all of the various places where crimes are created and at least display them in one single and universally accessible place. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I can go into various aspects, technical aspects of the code and of jurisprudence and of the theory of legal codification, but let me leave it there for now, and I will take your questions if there are any. David.
Okay, Martin, thank you very much. I see that Sam has posted a question here or a comment. It says violent crime is both an enforcement issue as well as a deep societal issue. This is on X, by the way. Fatherless homes, lack of faith in communities, lack of on-ramps to high-paying occupations in SA due to over-regulation, and the obvious lack of capacity in government law enforcement, as you have outlined. And I think Sam really there it catches the gist of what we're trying to convey with this campaign of, on the one hand, you've got this inability of the state to enforce its basic duty of upholding the rights of citizens, but then on the other hand, constraining economic activity. So would you like to respond there to Sam's comment on X?
Certainly, yeah. So the Free Market Foundation has existed since 1975. So we're not a new institution, and criminality has not been, you could say, a direct focus of ours. But it's quite clear, as Sam says, that crime doesn't just materialize out of thin air. If South Africa had 7% economic growth since 1994, if everyone was gainfully employed, if we had stable families, it would be baffling, really, if we had these really insane levels of violent crime. Yes, there are social causes, maybe there are cultural causes of criminality, but I think you can reduce it to economics, even if you might be subscribe to a culture that might be more open to certain things that are criminal. If you were just kept busy from 9 to 5 in the day by real work, productive work, you would simply not have time for criminality. And with 13 plus million South Africans unemployed, as they say, idle hands do the devil's work. And I would be surprised if we look at the various murderers, rapists, trespassers in this country, to find that they in fact have stable, well-paying jobs in the formal sector. I'd be very surprised. So yes, you cannot view criminality in isolation. Certainly not. Our Section 12 initiative is basically one aspect of a very holistic approach from the Free Market Foundation, which is really kind of dedicated to prosperity, a free market, a liberalized economy, an open economy, people working, investment from abroad. All these things contribute to prosperity and stability and to happiness ultimately, and all of that helps to undermine the extent of criminality. And our Section 12 project really looks more at the enforcement side of things, but that doesn't mean that we we're ignoring the kind of causes of crime. No, not by any means. So Sam, you're completely correct.
Okay, and what about this question from Zakele Khomo on YouTube? Is there a plan to get this draft criminal code into the hands of legislators?
Oh yes, no, absolutely. Yes, we as a think tank, a policy think tank, obviously have the ear of many people who at least used to be in parliament. We'll see what happens after tomorrow's election. I'm assuming many of them will return to parliament. And we will propose this certainly to parliament in our submissions on matters related to crime. For example, the president last week signed two peripherally related to crime bills into law. They don't really address South Africa's problems, but when the Free Market Foundation comments on the states have measures, we would certainly say that there are in fact solutions, viable solutions to violent crime in South Africa, and here they are. One of them is the criminal code. Now that doesn't mean that the state will see reason and in fact adopt the legislation. This is certainly a long game. But we do hope that people will see the sense in going to South Africans and showing them, listen, this is itemized what could land you in jail, so avoid this behavior. That's certainly the first step. And then a later step is we need to start removing some of those many items of criminality so that we as South Africans aren't constantly walking on eggshells. And this is certainly going to be our argument to Parliament.
And then we also have a comment on YouTube from PropLib. Which current non-violent crimes currently cause the biggest drag on resources or deflect resources from violent crimes?
That would be kind of impossible to say, really, because we don't. Our government doesn't release any kind of credible or accurate statistics on who is in our prisons. So the Free Market Foundation, I believe in April, we submitted a comprehensive Promotion of Access to Information Act request to the Department of Correctional Services because we need to understand who is in our prisons. In other words, who is receiving the attention and the energy of our police, our prosecutors, and our correctional services. And only once we receive that data in a kind of clear and not deceptive manner will we be able to see, wow, okay, so there are 10,000 people in prison for this non-violent victimless crime. Surely that cannot be right. Surely those 10,000 spaces and those 10,000 prosecutions should have been dedicated to the many violent criminals out there who have not yet been brought to justice. So we cannot say what we are basing our argument on is what is on the book, what is on the statute book. And that we can certainly say without a shadow of a doubt. There are many non-violent victimless crimes on there that shouldn't be on there, which could be deflecting attention by our prosecutors. Now, even if our prosecutors aren't focusing on it, it's still a problem because you can't. It's a well-known saying by now, I think, that you cannot respect the law if there's too much of it. If you over-criminalize and you make the scope of law, certainly of criminal law, so wide that people just that everything could be a crime in some way or another, people will just start disrespecting the law. And I think we've seen a lot of that. But so even if our prosecutors aren't spending a lot of time on these victimless crimes, it would still be important to take them off of the statute book. But we'll only really be able to give you an answer once Correctional Services gets back to us. They have sent us some data, but not any useful data yet. So once the deadline is reached and they haven't sent it, we will take the next step and appeal that inadequate response to the Minister of Justice. And if we still don't get the data, we will consider taking tangible legal steps against the government to get this data, just so that we can, in fact, quantify the extent of the problem.
Yeah, Martin, I think also one of the core principles of the rule of law is not only this principle of general application, that everybody is subject to the same rules, but that also those rules are known and knowable. So I think one of the concerns that we have is that we have this veritable thicket of rules and regulations, and actually your average everyday citizen, probably you and I as well, don't know about all of the myriad laws that apply to us and could be inadvertently committing crimes. I mean, for example, did you know that if you don't get the proper accreditation from the National Public Transport Regulator, you could be imprisoned or fined for up to 2 years, fined up to 100,000 Rand if you operate a tourism transport service without proper accreditation. If you are not displaying a tobacco product in the prescribed manner, you could be fined up to 100,000 Rand if you're a wholesaler. And I think even if the PI application that we put forward reveals that nobody has been prosecuted for this specific crime, the fact is that somebody could be prosecuted for that crime that's lying dormant on the books. They're generally applicable, but could be prosecuted specifically.
All right, that's important.
Yeah,
let me just make a point on that. It was observed during the Soviet Union, but I always find it interesting that somehow the Soviets were kind of singled out for it when it's a global phenomenon. That what that government did was that it criminalized so much behavior from its citizens with no intention to enforce it, really, just to make sure that if they wanted to throw some opposition leader in prison, that they could have a reason for that, a kind of a legal reason for that. So that is a problem. That is naked tyranny, really. When you have this kind of 100% criminalization of virtually everything, and the government has no intention of enforcing it, and it's kind of like, yeah, you people carry on doing what you're doing, don't worry. But if you are on the wrong side of some powerful politician, then that person will be able to say, no, but wait, you broke these and these laws. And now I'm going to throw you in prison, not because I don't like you or because you criticize administration, but because you broke the law, and we are a law-abiding society that believes in the rule of law. So when you over-criminalize, you're opening doors to a very perverse kind of handling of the law. And you shouldn't have that, because the law really is something that people must respect. It is something that people must trust and have confidence in rather than fear. And when you over-criminalize society, you do generate a lot of fear. So yeah, David, that's a crucial point.
Yeah, that's steps towards tyranny. That's how tyranny develops. All right, then Leanne asks, what steps should be taken to ensure that the criminal code is accessible and understandable to all citizens? That relates to that transparency point that I was making earlier.
Yeah, and the one of the issues also with over-criminalization, and this is kind of a technical kind of over-criminalization, is that when Parliament describes the crime, so when something is criminalized, Parliament has to have a provision that says anyone who shall be committing an offense. When Parliament does that, it often dresses it up in extremely complicated language. So I can think of two examples off the top of my head: the Terrorism Act of 2000 and the New Hate Speech Act that the president signed into law 2 weeks ago. Both of them have crimes that are kind of they lay over a whole page. So if you, and then it begins, and there's some bullet points, and there's A, B, and C, and then at the very bottom it says you shall have committed an offense. That is too complicated. It's too complicated for me, and I have 2 law degrees, and I'm working on a third. So how would it be accessible to a layperson? It would be as if I would have to read something about engineering or nuclear physics. It is completely inaccessible. So one of the features in the criminal code bill that we are proposing is a requirement upon the legislatures that create crimes to ensure that the criminalization provisions that they adopt are understandable to the layperson. So that is spelled out in the bill. The layperson must understand it. And if a court, if this thing is adopted and a case goes to court, and the layperson said, "Listen, I don't understand what this says," and the court says, "Well, yeah, this I can see how you cannot understand this," then that is not criminal. That would then not be criminal conduct, because the criminalizing provision is kind of a void for vagueness in a sense, or totally inaccessible. The bill also creates a new office of a recorder of crimes, which is someone who must have a law degree and who must guide the legislatures to ensure that there's coherence, there's consistency, the language is accessible to laypersons before something becomes criminal in South Africa. So the bill itself does address the issue of accessibility and understandableness. Because if it isn't understandable, then it may as well not exist, and therefore it cannot be regarded as criminal. You're muted, David.
Martin, sorry about that. I would be curious to hear what you think of our former colleague Mpiaki Dlamini's comment on X. What most ordinary people think of as our Western justice system when they complain about the justice system stems from this issue. They feel that the criminal justice system is opaque. If it more closely aligns with common sense, those attacks will disappear and the criminal justice system will enjoy broad support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's completely true, and it's a result of something that you might call French rationalism, really. So with the French Revolution, you had this kind of double-edged sword of enlightenment, where science and so on kind of became very prominent, and there was huge leaps in prosperity and in individual freedom. But one of the other things was this idea that we as human beings we're smart enough to plan society. We are smart enough to write something down, and then that will become reality. It's kind of a turning society into an engineering project, as Friedrich von Hayek would have later criticized them for. And this opaque Western justice system really is part of that. And ironically, the phenomenon of codification also was born out of French rationalism, but that's why in the explainer to the criminal code, I go to some lengths to say that we're not proposing the European French civil code approach to codification, which is basically to replace the common law, to say that the common law is no longer a source of criminality. Only the code is, because that takes away the court's role to kind of develop the law in a fair and kind of commonsensical direction. No, our code is proposed simply to be a place where people can go to see whether something is criminalized. It's a database really that is binding, and a crime has to appear there for it to become binding. But yes, Mpiaki is completely correct. And as someone, I consider myself kind of a Western supremacist when it comes to the legal tradition, and I'm very much committed to the Roman law system and the English common law system and our Roman Dutch tradition in South Africa. But if you make the law so inaccessible and so opaque and so vague, ultimately it simply serves the political elite, because they know that they will always kind of be exempt from the proper application of our law. And we've seen this with corruption in South Africa. It's always the little guy, the person who can least understand this huge legalese, this terrible legalese, who suffers under such an opaque system. So yes, I completely agree.
Right, Martin. Well, maybe we could just close off this live stream by just talking about next steps, where we see the project going. Obviously, we are likely to see some pretty significant political changes. We're going to have a new government in a week or so. Where do you see this project going? What is our next steps?
Yeah, so we're kind of now all holding our breaths to see what happens tomorrow with the general election. But this project wasn't really contingent on any specific political party winning or any grouping of political parties winning or losing. Really, these proposals are timeless. And we will continue to press for them to be recognized and adopted. Certainly, if our provinces become more contestable, if certain provinces become subject to coalition governments or to opposition-controlled governments, that will kind of lean into our decentralization aspect. of our project. We have been, as the FMF, through our campaign for Home Rule, we have been encouraging opposition-controlled municipalities and provinces and well-meaning ruling party-controlled provinces and municipalities to start addressing the scourge of violent crime unilaterally, to stop sending nice letters to the minister asking for permission to do so, to just do it out of necessity. And we will continue to push for that, because violent crime, you can solve load shedding, you can solve the impending crisis of water in South Africa, you can start solving all of those big issues. But if you don't solve the violent crime issue, then all of it is for naught. I think brain drain in South Africa, the primary reason for that is still crime. Even though lots of people say it's about finding opportunities, ultimately, people don't want to live the way that South Africans live, which is in constant fear of our lives. So that's, I think, it's the key thing that has to be addressed. And this election doesn't change that in isolation. So we're gonna keep pushing these messages. We're gonna insist that correctional services send us the data that we've requested. Section 33 of the Constitution provides that everyone has the right to access any information held by the state. It is presented without qualifiers. So we are perfectly entitled to see that data. And hopefully the police at some point in the future start releasing a clearer breakdown of who they are arresting, rather than these kind of broad strokes, monthly or quarterly statistics. In the United States, for instance, there are websites that individual sheriff's departments and police departments set up, which in real time say that we've just arrested someone 20 minutes ago for this crime. That is certainly the type of phenomenon you have to start seeing in societies where the state exercises a criminalizing function, which is all of them. So we believe in deep criminal justice reform, and we will continue to believe in that, and we will continue to press this message forward. So in addition to the PIA, we're also going to be updating our criminalization index semi-regularly. It's a big job, but we are committed to it. And yeah, please, if anyone is interested in what we've proposed, we can use your voice really to convince the new government to take some of these proposals seriously. And our website, section12.org.za, allows you to click through, take the action steps, and put this on the agenda of the outgoing government and the incoming government and all the opposition parties. You'll be able to send an email to your selected recipients, and don't worry, you will be able to see the email before it goes out. Some people on Twitter have said, we can't see the email. Don't worry, you will be able to see it, and if you object fundamentally, then you don't have to send it. But if you believe in common sense criminal justice reforms, I don't think you'll see anything objectionable in that short letter that we have generated. So please, if you find this interesting and valuable, please go to our website and take the action steps. We would really appreciate it, and South Africa will be better for it.
Yeah, and that website is section12.org.za, where you can add your voice to this very important initiative. And then if you'd like more information on the draft criminal code, you can see our press release, which is linked here, as well as the draft criminal code itself. But I think that's all the time that we have for this morning. I'd encourage you to sign up, sign the pledge, but also engage with our content on various social media platforms. And do reach out to us, particularly if you're a member of the press, if you would like to understand more about the work that we're doing here at the Free Market Foundation. But that's it from me, David Ansara and Martin van Staden. Until next time, stay free.